excuse me because my English is not good enough to speak in English. So friends, we'll try to do a translation of my ideas for you. At first, I want to say I'm very glad because I'm here and we will have an opportunity to change the idea. Okay? I will speak language is easier to me.
What I'm going to say here today evidently is not the last word on the subject. It has sentiments, beliefs, perceptions in the midst, in a way that what I'm bringing here today are things to consider, because they come from considerations of someone who studies the doctrine, who likes, who appreciates, who loves Spiritism. And we take advantage of this moment to have this, to share these impressions with our dear friends, yourselves. I start with remembering an episode that happened with our Francisco Cândido Xavier, one of the biggest mediums, one of the biggest sensitive mediums of all times. Chico still lived in the city of Pedro Leopoldo, and once in a while, in the middle of the night, as he walked through the streets, he would see a person that would start drinking since the afternoon. And now around 2-3 a.m. he was fallen in the middle of the street. And not rare occasions, Chico would see this man and he would speak to him, this man who had been fallen drunk on the streets, and sometimes he would take him home in the middle of the night. He would shower him, would give him some coffee. When this man was then feeling better, more sober, he would go home. And this happened several times, until one day, this man is invited by a church, an evangelical church, one of those various Christian denominations that exist in the IESS or even in Brazil. And interestingly, miraculously, he decides on this day to stop drinking. The message touched him so deeply that he made the commitment to himself, the goodwill, the desire to stop drinking. And so was his dedication. And with the help of his companions from church, from battle to battle, one step at a time, this man was able to win over his alcoholism. However, given his gratitude to Chico from the times that he would help him on the streets, although he was now part of a different religion, different from Spiritism, which Chico was a part of, he once in a while would go visit Chico. Not exactly in a Spiritist center, he would go to the house of Chico Xavier to visit him. Due to the past relationship that I have had, and the assistance and the gratitude that he had, everything that Chico had done for him. On one of those visits, in which he was visiting Chico, he addresses himself to the medium. He says, "So Chico, they say that you communicate with the spirits, and that there's a special spirit called Emmanuel, who, well, they say that he's supposedly a very wise spirit, and since he's so wise, I would like for you to send him a question, to ask him a question for me. It's an anguish that I've carried within myself, because although I have dedicated to the Holy Scriptures, the Old and the New Testament, I have this doubt that's very present in me. no matter how much I study, more than 30 verses of the Bible, I can't understand a very simple question. It's because in the Gospel of Matthew 24:25, as in the Gospel of Mark 13, Jesus says that the times have come, and that when the time comes, that God would send upon earth a fire that would destructive fire that would select those that were good from the bad, in a way that once and for all, the sheep would be separated from the wolves. And then this world would then turn into a happy world and a better world. Since Exodus from the Old Testament up into John and Apocalypse in the New Testament, speak of these days that will come, these transformations, in that we will in the end will have a better earth, a better world to live in. And the question that I have, will you ask the Spirit, Emmanuel, what is it that God is waiting for? What is he waiting for? Why hasn't he started this already? Why hasn't he sent the fire, the destructive fire, in a way to separate for the good ones from the bad ones? Can you ask him that? Your spirit, your guides, this Emmanuel guy? Chico heard the question silent. And he said to the pastor, well, at that moment he had turned into a pastor, become a pastor. He said, Pastor, Emmanuel's here present, and he heard your question. And he told me to tell you the following. He wants me to ask you another question. He wants me to ask you, why did God...
Enquanto eles se achavam perdidos, o errado da sarjeta, ele não pedia de Deus providência.
Repete a pergunta.
Emmanuel was present and he asked to Chico. And he said, Pastor, he asks that I answer you in the following by asking you another question. Why is God?
Why God did you wait you until yesterday?
Why did God wait for you until yesterday? Why didn't God wait until yesterday? It's simple. In fact, when that man found himself wrong, belonging to the wolves, to the evil ones, the lost ones, he was not asking God's accounting about this fire. From the moment that he thought himself as saved, the elect, the chosen, the correct one, then he needed to have this rush for this to happen, so that once and for all he could get rid of the people that are bad, these people that get in the way of the happiness on the earth. This desire of this better world, this idealism, this angst for a better world is in humanity ever since from the very beginning. All of us dream and aspire of days of better justice, more equality, more egalitarianism. All of us hope and wait that one day there can be more brotherhood, understanding, comprehension. It is from the human soul that mainly in the moments of crisis, in the moments when we are jolted by big unfortunate events or sadness or suffering, when the news are so bad, depressing, when from one side or another side new ideas come that are terrorizing, that are fear-based, it's natural for us to react with anguish and to ask and hope for better days. In the book of Isaiah, which was written 730 years before the coming of Christ, he already dreamed of this new Jerusalem, with this new earth, with this new world that would be different. And in chapter 13 of his book, he said, the great Jewish medium says in that book, on that day, the sheep will live together with the wolves. The leopard will be the friends of the goats. The lions and the little sheep are going to walk side by side. The cows and the bears will be companions in the same walk. The little children will be able to play amongst venomous snakes, or take their hands and put it in the cave of the scorpions, and nothing will happen to them, because that will be the day of peace, the day of harmony, the day of the grace and the kingdom of God. The philosopher Plato, 500 years before Christ, when he wrote the book The Republic, he already imagined a society that was directed and organized by men and women who were intelligent and emotionally mature. He already predicted at the time that there would be a type of aristocracy of people who were more developed and capable to lead the nations and the peoples in a more intelligent way, and as well with feeling, with sentiment. In the 16th century, we have the famous utopias. In Thomas More, one of the greatest utopian writers of all time. In this movement, in this desire to imagine that from a particular point, strange things will happen so that the new world can begin, sociology calls this millenarianism or millennialism, because it began in the year 1999, when people used to think that the time had come, that the time had arrived, and therefore no one worried about the day of tomorrow. No one paid their credit card bills that day. Everyone borrowed because they thought the world was going to end from 1999 to 2000, but it didn't end. In the year 1666, because of the number of Apocalypse 666, known as the beast of the Apocalypse, they thought at the time that they would not get to the year 1667. So whoever didn't pay their bills that year got into trouble, because 1667 came and the bill also came. It's natural. It's human, this desire for better days. Especially when the world is so confused, when the news that we hear are so disaggregating, disharmonious, disturbing, and depressing. We have this anxiety, this angst for a better time. So this idea, this apocalypticism, which is so common in many religions, have infiltrated itself, including in the Spiritist movement, without the least rationalization, so that we can in fact verify if truly we have the conditions, when we consult our own selves, verifying our own possibilities, where we are. Do we have the conditions and the ability to inhabit this new Jerusalem, this new world. Many of us here have come from Brazil, and most certainly they have brought along with them a modus operandi or a cultural way of being, which is a typical way of being Brazilian. And I am certain that when they arrived in North America, they had to adapt, they had to adjust to new laws, new regulations, a way of being that the society here behaves. They noticed, or we noticed, that if we maintained the way of being and we were in Brazil, it wouldn't work out here. And so, is it this pattern that we have, that's mental and emotional pattern, does it prepare us? Does it give us the ability to inhabit a better world? Are we to the point already to inhabit the so-called world of regeneration? In the year of 1840, right here in New York State, a pastor named William Miller predicted that in 1843, this destructive fire would come, the destructive fire. Some evangelical denominations associate this destruction with the second coming of Christ, which is known as parousia. And according to this pastor, William Miller, from 1843 to 1844, the whole planet would be swept up by a fire of destructive nature. 1843 came, 1844 arrived, and the fire didn't come. Here we are, very well, thank God, in 2018. But then the Adventist Church of the Seventh-day Adventist Church came about when people believed in that in such a way that they couldn't endure the idea that this had not come, and so it would come at any moment, that it was just imminent. So it's natural, I repeat, that we desire for these better days. But up to what point are we capable or in conditions to enter into this new planet with these different laws, with these different propositions that are of a spiritual nature that are different than the ones that we have today? There's a history of some very dark pages in our recent history that somehow point to our precariousness and our lack of preparation. We are in the year 2018, and it's been only 73 years that one of the biggest scandals, one of the most barbaric phenomena in all of human history, which was World War II. From 1939 to 45, one developed nation, rich, intellectually, and artistically developed as well, and even religiously prepared, established that some people needed to die, did not deserve life, because they simply were born as Jewish, black, homosexual. Germany of the Nazi era is a dark page in the history of Western civilization, filled with techniques, filled with intelligence, filled with art, filled with religion. And yet, 73 years ago, this still took place. No one here witnessed that war. But that's very recent. This horror took place just less than a century ago, and the world witnessed More than 6 million Jews alone were killed. From 1948 to 1994, therefore, 24 years. In South Africa pervaded the system of apartheid, where a white minority felt itself in the right to enslave and subjugate an immense black majority. What crime did they commit? To be born black? Friends, it's been only 24 years that we've witnessed, amongst all the technique, all the technological development and progress, it's been 24 years. And this shocks us because it reveals that this society, as it is still capable of barbaric acts. We have witnessed the outrage and the exchange of bickering between this government and North Korea. The world concerns itself because by one misstep from one or both, we can face another conflict of gigantic proportions with a destructive power that is immense. And it doesn't matter if we have iPads, iPods, that we talk through satellite, because we've discovered the cure of many diseases. Human being still seems to be immature. Humanity. Forgive me to paint this somewhat depressing picture here, but in the sense that we may be able to do a reflection, an evaluation of what our choices have been, our preferences. About 1.5 years ago, a very powerful nation chose to represent itself somebody whose basis of governance is established, the separation of the world between poor and rich, decided to close its borders against the poor, the refugees, all the nations that were miserable and poor, just in case, are being discriminated. And so, who chose this representative? Even if the election models are diverse, nonetheless, there was a majority of people, or a people, that chose it. So those who choose to represent our ideals, those who represent what I wish, more than any theory, more than any concept or any word, I reveal myself in the vote, in the person that I choose, because it's defending my interests. It didn't happen differently in Brexit. Today there's suspicions of manipulation of voters, but the fact is that the British people opted, which they were belonging to a European bloc of 28 nations, very rich and not so rich nations, and more poorer countries like Greece. So they became a little bit uncomfortable about that, to share the bloc with more poor countries, and so they had to somehow share the wealth of Britain with these countries. And so what has motivated, what led some of these people to choose to leave the United Kingdom, to depart the United Kingdom from the Union? So their desires and their willingness for goodwill, for comfort, they're wanting not to share. All the parties today, the so-called political parties of the right, they have a platform that is somehow threatening, in the extent that they sustain, that they uphold the closing down of borders. The world doesn't know what to do with the refugees. of Syria, of Sudan, of Afghanistan, in a way that the candidates of extreme right, they defend the closing down of borders so that the wealth can be maintained and kept only for its people to the detriment of other nations. And in question 913 of the Spirit's book, the question reveals that that is a type of selfishness. Selfishness is one of the biggest calamities of the human soul. Is the desire to have just for oneself. We are still like that. We choose governors and representatives that fulfill our desires and our anxieties and our yearnings. So they reflect what we want. And as I make these choices, I reveal myself in the process. And so you've entered a spiritist environment, this idea that there's some kind of urgency, that this is the very, very last opportunity. I recall the Apostle Paul in this first letter to the Thessalonians saying, rush, hurry, transform yourselves, change yourselves. In Greek it means metanoite. Meta means beyond. Noite, mind. So transform your mind because it's imminent, the transformation of the world. And we, as spiritists, are repeating these ideas that are apocalyptic in nature or eschatological. It means eschaton, anything that's related to the end of the world. Do we really have this possibility of predicting it? Let's go to Genesis in chapter 16, which means knowledge of pre-science. Item 16, Allan Kardec says the following. In the times of crises, of great calamities, some spirits are able to predict some of these occurrences, but they never are able to do it with precision, with defined dates, because that is up to the choices of people, free will. The spirit's entities, therefore, don't say at which time or year or what exactly is going to unfold, because there simply is a relativity of the possibility of us making choices. And so Kardec continues saying that all those who insist and persist in giving precise dates is doomed to mystification, doomed to mistakes, doomed to errors, and subject to the influence of spirits that are fake spirits, so to speak. So Kardec and Spiritism doesn't even allow for these types of specific predictions that sometimes we see in our own Spiritist movement. When we see that there is still a very precarious human conditions. One of these days, I was making this comment at a center in Rio de Janeiro. After my comment, a lady looked me up very polite, very subtly. She said to me, Eduardo, you said all of these things, but I believe that there is a minority, there's a silent minority, that despite all of these horrible things that are happening, there's a minority, there's a people that moves itself in a positive way. And you will allow me the irony here. My friend, if the minority is silent, how do I hear them? If they don't speak and there are not a lot of people, how am I going to hear them? I'm speaking ironically. It's not that I don't recognize the good deeds and the actions and the positive movements. If I was a pessimist, I wouldn't be here talking to you. If I wasn't certain that this world is transforming itself, then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't go from Brazil all the way here in order to commune, to share, to partake these ideas with you. I'm very optimistic. I know that there is an ultimate destination, a plan, that we are in the midst of this development of this plan. But this idea that it's going to happen right away, that it has come, take advantage. It's gonna go. If you miss the boat, then you're damned if you miss the boat. This urgency, this urgency we have to have about improving ourselves. But she said, no, Eduardo, this actually lasts 1,000 years. And I said, why didn't you tell me now? So we've only been 18 years in the 21st century. Why do I keep anticipating these things and exposing the Spiritist ideas to these dogmatic religions that are still communing with these ideas? We will get to this world. Earth will go through from a planet of trials and atonements into a world of regeneration. But that will occur as we employ significant changes inside ourselves, in our way of being. If we arrive in the spiritual realm in the way that we are today, we're gonna wreak havoc, because our way of being, it goes through, it causes a lot of disharmony. It gets in the way. As I was walking on the street, I had eaten something sweet and I had a piece of paper in my hand. And for conditioning purposes, I waited for a trash bin to throw it in the trash. As I threw it, but as I threw the in the trash, I said to myself, no, I'm going to throw it on the street just so I can do something wrong. Of course, I didn't do that, but these ways of being that are not very disciplined, we're not going to carry these over to the next world. So we need to observe and realize if there isn't an excessive desire for this world to arrive, isn't it beyond our reasoning and our rationality? Sure, the world is complicated. There is inequality everywhere. Not all creatures have the same possibilities. Sure. Do you know Jadson? Jadson? He is today with 14 years of age. His grandmother is arrested and in jail for drug trafficking. His mother is being sought after for theft. His 15-year-old brother was killed by a rival gang. The 17-year-old brother, who's older, has escaped justice. His cousins, uncles, they are serving sentences all over Brazil in many jails. But when Jadson was 10 years old, he belonged to a soccer team, and he went with his team to play in Verona in Italy. And in the audience watching the game was a pediatrician, an Italian pediatrician named Irene Zagne, who became enchanted with that boy, black boy, from a social condition that was very unfavorable, and she adopted him. In May of this year, the 2nd May of this month, Mother's Day, Jadson, with his 3 other siblings, also adopted, and the father organized a surprise party for their new mother. So if Jadsons of the world that are in the slums in Rio The Jadsons that I know and that I work with in bringing the gospel with culinary teaching. We have 14 teenagers there that are so intelligent, super sensitive, and also very lost. How many Jadsons are there? How many Jadsons? How many Jadsons actually get to the window of a car to try to steal something because perhaps they didn't have the same development possibilities? We read in chapter 18 of the book Genesis by Kardec, when in item 27 of chapter 18, Allan Kardec says that there will be a migration. These hardened spirits that don't modify themselves will no longer come back to earth, because earth will have then been modified. And in the way it has been modified will be exactly in the non-return of these hardened spirits. And so the codifier, he upholds the idea that there will be in a certain moment a certain separation where hardened souls that didn't have the ability to inhabit the earth will no longer come back. They'll be going to other planets that are below, that are more in sync with their own selves. And in chapter 18, in the item, he says, "Forgive my reverence, but I'd like to give you conditions so that you can come back and reflect and evaluate for yourselves." Item 27 says that. But item 29, if we keep reading that passage, we're going to see Kardec say the following: "But the spirits that will leave the earth will not necessarily be all the hardened ones, because many behave that way out of circumstances, and rather than the bad examples. They are hardened only in the shell than in the essence. These are people that are badly situated or are disoriented, that are violent. But it doesn't mean that they are intrinsically bad. They gave away to the circumstances, to conditions. They gave in to the environment that they were in." And allow me once more to quote, which is question 639 in the Spirits book, when Kardec asks the spirits, "Isn't it that many times the evil that man practices is the result of the place that they are situated?" This is a precise question. It was asked in 1857. Isn't it that many times that the evil that man commits isn't the result of the place, the conditions that they were placed? So who is to blame? The question asks. And the spirits answer, yes, the evil ones. The guilty one is those who commit the evil, and those who didn't offer the conditions of education and growth are even more culpable. This engenders in us a certain degree of responsibility, so that we can realize, if not the 7,300,000,000 souls on this planet are having the same conditions, the same examples of development that a small minority perhaps has as benefits. Without getting you tired, I'd like to apologize. I would like to cite question 813 in the Spirits book, when he asks the spirits, the entities, When the creature arrives in dire poverty, when an individual succumbs to poverty out of his own guilt or his own mistake, does society have any responsibility to it? In our rationale, once it's out of your own fault, then we would say no, society is not to blame. It was his own fault, his choices, his decision was his. Well, friends, the spirits answer. They diverge and they say, the creatures that arrive in poverty out of their own fault, has society any responsibility or fault over it? And they respond, yes, they do, because it was up to society to elevate these spirits and guide them to education. Notice that in Spiritism springs forth a certain social responsibility, a gaze that demands a certain distribution of equality, to give people all the possibilities that they can show themselves or reveal that if they're intrinsically truly evil, or if they're just confused in their shell, or if they're just in the external appearances. For some years I was in this city called Vitória da Conquista in the inland state of Bahia in Brazil. I was there for a few years. And I used to be a guest at a couple's house, Renan and Aurea Lanes. A very atypical couple, and you'll see why. He was a doctor, ophthalmologist. She was a housewife. And let's understand why she was a housewife. Because Renan and Aurea had 3 children. And they adopted another 28. Yes, it's true, it exists. I witnessed with my own eyes. It was a beautiful, big home. It was a whole block in the street. Whenever I would arrive, sometimes I'd spend 10 days with them in their home. He would actually be able to secure for me a bedroom with a bathroom just for myself. And I said, Renan, how many did you kick out? At night when I would arrive back home, all the children would come. Oh, he's the uncle that's coming from Rio. So they would all gather on the sofa in the TV room. A very big room with a carpet and a rug. So we would watch some TV together, we would chat. And all the 31 children along myself and the parents. It was very moving in the next day, upon waking up, going to the living room to go to have breakfast and to see all those children there. One elbowing in somebody's mouth, one's in somebody's foot, in the armpits, all mixed there. Children that were very beautiful, ugly, black, white, good hair, not so good hair, intelligent, and sometimes not so intelligent people. They were all welcomed in that home. And Renan used to say, I would like to open an orphanage. And I said, it's not an orphanage, this is your family. 31 children. And he would say to me, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die until I give each one of them their own home. I said, wow, you're going to be a millionaire. 31 apartments. In the year that I was there was a young boy that day was his 6th birthday. He had left the streets. Him and his 2 other brothers, the mother,
had syphilis,
was alcoholic,
vivia nas sarjetas,
was always on the streets.
E esse garoto de
And this
6 anos
6-year-old boy
viu o pai
saw
trucidado
the
por uma
father
carreta.
being run over
O
by
pai
a
só
truck.
teve tempo de jogar o filho no colo
All
dele.
he had time to do was to throw the child out, and he received his brother in his arms, and he understood his role
Ele se
that he needed to
transformou
do.
em dono da casa, o chefe da casa.
He became the man of the
Com 6
house
anos de idade,
at 6 years old.
ele entendeu
He understood
que se ele ameaçasse os outros garotos
that
de
if
rua,
he threatened the other
que
boys
se
on
ele
the
mostrasse
street,
que não tinha medo
that if
de
he
ninguém,
showed them that he was
ninguém
not
se
afraid,
atreveria a
then
mexer com a
nobody
mãe
would
e
dare
com seus 2 irmãos.
to mess with his brothers or his mother. So he would talk with other people with curse words, with violence, because it was the law of the strongest. He was the man of the house. He needed to fulfill that role, so he needed to defend his family. For some years, for some time, that was the boy, the man of the house, until the judge in the city interceded. The mother was hospitalized, and amidst so many people who would not accept their children as foster children, you know that as they get older, it's harder for them to get adopted. So the 3 children were lost, and the judge had one recourse, the last hope. Dr. Renan, he called him. It's not 1, it's 3. And he said, send him over. And he arrived in the home. The boy looked at me with a certain violence, aggression in his eyes. Who are you? Who are you that talks with an accent? The first few days, he would yank the food away from the kids and used to push them. Sometimes I saw a child would come and complain to the parents, saying he hit me. That's what he learned on the streets. At the end of 1 week, one of the most emotional scenes I've seen. I'm very connected with this area of education and children, and one of the most unforgettable scenes was when I saw this boy running through the hallway of the house, screaming to the mother, crying that another child had taken away his candy. Now he was running to his mother's arm, asking his mother for help. He had somebody to run to. Now he had somebody to help him. And from his 6-year-old, he decided to be a child again, rescued his childhood. When I was about to tell you this story, curiously, after 4 years of not speaking with this couple, one of these days, one of the children of the couple called me, said, "Uncle, Mom wants to talk to you. She's been thinking a lot about you." And we began to talk, me and her on the phone. And I said, "Aurea, I would like to tell this story." And so she revives my memory by saying that the day that he arrived, he was 6 years old. We went out and we went to a fast food place to eat a burger and celebrate his birthday. A child that up to that point would hit and fight in order to dispute food on the street, perhaps didn't understand that that day around him was the father, mother, and all the siblings, and he was able to eat a burger all by himself. That was the signal that his life was different. And so, how many Jadsons, how many boys like that? I allow myself to give the name, of course. How many of these children are awaiting the chance to become children again and reveal what's good in them? So when Kardec says that when some are evil, it's more in the shell than in their essence, It's because these people perhaps don't have the paradigms and the examples to guide them, or the compass to guide them in life. I don't know if you're aware, but it's not just Brazil, but all over the world. The prison population is gigantic. We have in Brazil, from 2016 statistics, 381,000 spaces for jail, and we actually have 584,000 inmates. So if you have difficulty in understanding what this means, imagine that it's like putting 8 people inside a Beetle car forever. And that's how the inmates in the poorer countries live, including Brazil. There, without any condition or educational compass, they live. And every 4 inmates, 3 of them, of every 4, 3 of them, when they are arrested a second time, they are arrested for a crime that was worse than when they were first arrested from the first crime. So throughout the stage that they are in prison, they just become better criminals. So the one that commits fraud becomes a kidnapper. That one was a common thief, becomes a professional robber. The one that just robbed begins to kill. In the state of Maryland, near here, there is a judge called David, I don't know how, B-U-R, David Burr. David Burry brings an extraordinary study showing that the inmates in U.S. prisons who are led to prisons where they are respected with the least amount of dignity, they have 40% more likelihood to readjust themselves than those inmates in the same profile that are taken to other prisons that are more inhumane, in precarious conditions. He shows us that the reference, the way of the person being treated demands of them a type of feedback that increase the possibilities for them to readjust themselves because they were treated with respect. These are the consideration, my friends, that I would like to bring to you, because it bothers us, these ideas that grow, that develop in our midst, Spiritist midst, and we don't think through that Earth definitely walks from a world of trials and atonements to a world of regeneration. Since John in the Apocalypse, chapter 21, verse 16, he used to say that this earth, a new Jerusalem would approach this earth, a new planet, a new world. But we are on the way there. We will get there, yes. But something has to change within us. And what I notice is that those who uphold, like the pastor of our little story in the beginning, those who uphold this idea that the time has already come, and woe to those who don't take advantage of this incarnation, because the bus is going to run through, and if you miss the boat, you're going to be left behind, then I suspect that those who defend this idea, that are in the same position as this particular pastors, who feel themselves as sheep, who ask God for resources, who believe themselves to be right, and now it's time to kick out all these people that are not worth it. I think to myself, where are these developed people? Will there be enough people in these conditions to inhabit this new world? or when Earth gets transformed, will be like Alaska, so empty, because our society still needs learning and growth. I would like to bid farewell to you, once again asking for your apologies for this, but I wanted to bring these reflections to you so that we can think together, and yes, we may ask of ourselves real substantial changes and modifications in the way that we see life, in the way we appreciate life, in the way we relate with others. We definitely need to change. And I'd like to remember, as in conclusion, the Prometheus legend. The Greeks were very prodigious, very crafty and smart. They created this mythology in order to understand the world. And according to them, Prometheus was not exactly a god, but was a semi-god, since he was the son of the earth, of Mother Earth, and Zeus. And maybe because Prometheus suffered when he saw that in Olympus, in the world of gods, there was the fire, and on earth there wasn't yet the fire when it was at night. His half-siblings, the humans, they suffered in darkness at night. And so Prometheus then creates a feat. He steals the fire from the gods, steals from the Olympus, and brings it to earth, and gives the fire as a gift to humans. One day, Zeus saw the earth at night and saw it was all lit up, like with fires everywhere. There was light, and Zeus was indignant. He said, who was the one that was the author of this feat to remove the fire from the gods of Olympus and bring it to humans? He discovered that it was Prometheus. So the semi-god, he grabs him by the hair and flies with him to a mountain, which is a Caucasus mountain. There he ties him up against a rock and orders that a vulture would come to eat his liver from the semi-god. And since Zeus wanted to take revenge, he was very creative in that way. He ordered that the bowels that were eaten during the day would grow back at night, so that when the vulture would arrive the next day, he could find a brand new liver, and there he could maintain the suffering of Prometheus forever. Because during the day, his bowels were eaten out, and at night they would grow back, and the vulture would come back the very next day to satiate himself. This is a very interesting story, because it brings us the idea that all those people that bring light to the world have to pay a price for it. These are the Prometheuses that bring messages of hope, love, of harmony. But in order to intrude in this world, they pay a very high price for it. According to this legend, Zeus, after taking revenge on Prometheus, decides to take revenge on humanity. And so, what did he do? He built a box, a beautiful box, filled with precious gems, rubies, sapphires, diamonds, everything ornamented in gold and silver, beautiful box. He delivered it to the hands of Hermes, which is the messenger of the gods, and sent it that he would bring this beautiful box to Pandora. Pandora was the wife of Epimetheus. Epimetheus was the brother of Prometheus. So Pandora was the sister-in-law of Prometheus. Please, you don't need to remember all of this because it's not going to be on the exam. Zeus brings, Hermes brings that beautiful box, finds Pandora and gives to her, "Here, Pandora, this is the gift that Zeus brings to you." "For me?" "Yes, Pandora. Zeus gave this box, this beautiful box to you. It's all yours." She takes the box, begins to admire the gems that glow, that radiate. She's enchanted by it. And then the semi-god, as he says goodbye, he said, "Listen, I forgot one small detail. Zeus gave you this gift and this beautiful box, but he asked, he almost demanded that you shall never open it. Never open this box, please, Pandora." Who laughed here? Already discovered the punchline, right? How do you give a box to a woman like that, this woman, and says that she can't open this box? It could have been made of cardboard. But Hermes had not even turned the corner when Pandora decides. She didn't open the box, she just wanked it wide open. And inside this box, all the illnesses and all the ills of the world came out of that box, escaped the box. All the tears came out, all the diseases that are incurable, all the separations, all the farewells, all that is ugly came out of this box and spread itself all over the world. That's how the Greek gods or the Greeks explained the ills of the world. That's how they explained what happens in our world. At the bottom of the box, there's only one thing left. All the ills came out, but inside remained one thing. To this thing they give the name hope. Hope, which is the daughter of faith. Hope never ends, because on the basis of hope and faith we are able to experience the most terrible things, because faith is unconditional. We can't really treat and talk to God, which up to 1,000,000 deaths we believe in him, but after that we can't believe in him anymore. We can't really establish such conditions. So the soul that has hopes, that is the daughter of faith, it awaits. Not the verb to wait. Hope in the sense of really hoping, to await as we act, as we do. So all of us, no matter how sad the news may be, we heard Jesus say, those who persevere until the end will be liberated, will be saved. So those who maintain their role of doing the best that they can within themselves, giving of themselves, those are ready. Because according to Paul the Apostle, when the Thessalonians were all anxious about when these new days will arrive, that the Lord would return, Paul, in an inspired way, he said, "It will come at night like a thief." Meaning, nobody knows the time it's going to come. Nobody expects the arrival of the thief. And so what can we do? Is to maintain ourselves firm in our ideals, in our goals, in our beliefs, surrounded and protected by the faith, in the hope that yes, this world does walk to a better stage, but that there will have to undergo still a lot of suffering, or a little bit, or a lot, in order to comprehend the message of brotherhood, of love, of equality, and equanimity. I close by saying this conversation of ours tonight by asking permission of our translators to repeat to you the verses of Margarida Lopes de Almeida, the great Brazilian poet, in her poem Offering.
Só faz bem devagar, por favor.
I just asked him to do it slowly so we can catch up to him. Lord, I came to... Senhor, venho dar-te a sorrir.
minha imensa alegria.
Começo.
Lord,
Senhor,
não, por favor.
Senhor, venho dar-te a sorrir toda a minha alegria.
I give you all my joy as I smile to you, my immense happiness,
Meu riso,
my laughter,
felicidade,
my happiness,
meu amor.
my love.
Senhor,
Lord,
todos vêm a ti
all come to you to plead,
para pedir,
to ask,
para implorar,
to implore,
para exigir de
to
ti
demand from you
consolação,
comfort,
auxílio,
help,
bênçãos
blessings,
ou perdão.
or forgiveness.
Eu não,
I don't do that, Lord.
eu venho para dar.
I come to give.
Recebe em tuas mãos
Receive in your
as
hands
alegrias,
that are used
preces e
to
imprecações,
collecting prayers and requests,
lágrimas,
tears in despair,
ramo perfumado
a fragrant
de lírios e de rosas,
a fragrant bunch of lilies and roses,
e sorrisos,
of singings
hosanas,
and praises and thanksgiving.
Toma de mim pouco de
Give from me, take from me some of this beatitude, these blessings, so that you can give to each creature that in life does not know the glory of serving.
Tenho a tanto, meu Deus, que embora comes, tenta-me farta messe.
Repete.
Embora comes,
Although you take,
tenta-me farta messe.
volta pouco a mais.
Para dar,
In order to give,
cuidar.
in order to give and to distribute.
Quero gritar ao mundo
I'd like
que adora a
to
vida,
scream to the world that I love life,
que é boa,
which is good,
que é bela,
is beautiful,
que é forte
it is strong
e apetecível.
and satiating.
E mesmo que a minha sorte
And
se
even if
transforme
my
em
luck gets transformed
súbito,
suddenly,
e o que é bom
and what is
e belo,
good
a
and
morte me
beautiful,
arrebate com as
that
mãos.
death may take away from me with its hands, with cruelty,
Eu bendirei a vida.
I will still bless life.
Eu bendirei
I
a
will
vida.
bless life.
Na saudade
In
do
the
bem
longing of a good that I had and that is so good, so big,
que há de iluminar
that will
eternamente,
illuminate eternally
mesmo a treva mais
even
densa.
the densest of darkness and most profound. Lord,
Uma luz
a light
fulgurante os meus olhos inunda.
that a light that shines in my eyes and floods me. Take a little bit of this light and scatter and pour over to those who are blind of joy, or the ones that are perverted or evil. And let me tell you with love,
Obrigado, Senhor,
thank you, Lord,
por estar aqui.
to be alive.
Obrigado, Senhor,
Thank you, Lord, because I believe in you.
Obrigado, Senhor,
Thank you, Lord,
por estar
because
aqui.
I am here, to be here.
Obrigado, Senhor,
Thank you, Lord,
pelos meus amigos.
for my friends here at Inner Enlightenment in New York. Peace for all of you. Lots of peace to you.